So more and more for the past few years we've seen speculation and conversations about a potential Wild West setting for Assassin's Creed. In this video I want to give my thoughts on if that would work and if it could ever happen. This is all just my opinion, so if you guys feel differently I'm more than open to discuss that. Anyway though, let's talk about Assassin's Creed in the Wild West. The Wild West is probably my favourite setting of all time, not just in TV, movies and games, but also historically. There's so much intrigue, lawlessness and injustice in this period that it's proven itself adaptable to so many different kinds of stories. With all that in mind though, you'd think I'd like this setting for an Assassin's Creed game, but to be honest, I really don't. A lot of things I love about the setting just clash with what Assassin's Creed means to me. Most people consider the Wild West to have begun after the American Civil War ended in 1865 and to have ended towards the back end of the 1890s. To be honest with you, I don't really like the idea of a game being set this close to present day. I didn't really like Syndicate being set in 1868 and later the 1880s in the Jack the Ripper DLC, and this game, were it to happen, could be set as close as the 1890s. I know some people really love the idea of getting an Assassin's Creed as recent as the 20th century, with people talking about Prohibition, World War I, and even World War II, but I really don't like it. To me, the closer and better documented the time period is, the worse that it is for Assassin's Creed. It feels far less distant and as a result less interesting, and takes away a lot of the mystery. The main reason I don't like games being more modern though is because of the progression of technology and weapons. For me, Assassin's Creed gameplay has always been about close range melee combat with a variety of weapons and beautiful worlds that lend themselves to parkour, both of which just don't work in a Wild West setting. If you look at western states like Oregon, Nevada or Utah, you'll see places that consist of a lot of desert, forest or mountainlands, especially back in the 1800s. Any towns or cities that were there were quite barren and empty, and the world of the Wild West really does not work for parkour. To go back to combat for a second though, this would be equally as bad. If you went about the West trying to kill people with blades or blunt close range weapons, you'd quickly die. Not only had the Second Amendment been passed back in 1791, well before the Wild West was about, allowing Americans to have rights to arms, but they were also readily available just about anywhere. Not just old pistols either, but 6-shooters, repeaters, carbines and Gatling guns. And while the guns were really played down in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, you just couldn't do that in the Wild West. They'd have to be far more prominent and powerful. So then Ubisoft would always have the option to make Assassin's Creed a shooter, which someone is probably after, but not me. There's enough shooters out there already and it's a really saturated market, whereas Assassin's Creed has always been quite unique to me and part of its draw, and making it a Wild West shooter would take away a lot of that for me. So now I've spoken a bit about the negatives of the gameplay, it's only fair to talk about the positives. Just because I don't like this setting for Assassin's Creed doesn't mean that I just want to neglect any of the qualities that would work for its gameplay. For one, I think that a Western Assassin's Creed would force Ubisoft to improve horse riding, which as of late has been a bit bland, with not even an option to gallop. I'd say you could use the horse to store things, but Ubisoft are more than likely going to go for bottomless inventories again. The other gameplay feature that could really progress is hunting, which has been very bare bones before now, but we could see it expanded on. And to be honest, that's about all I like in terms of gameplay opportunities, at least that I can think of now. There could be some huge set pieces or battles, but I wouldn't like it just because of how un-Assassin's Creed it'd be in that western setting. Off the topic of gameplay though, I can tell you one thing that I actually really like about this setting for Assassin's Creed, and that's the injustice. For me, a lot of Assassin's Creed thematically has been about fighting different levels of injustice and tyranny, and this setting admittedly is a goldmine for that. At this point in time there was so many people being wronged by so many different groups. You might have heard this time period being called the Gilded Age, as a lot of America's first billionaires came about during this time, who would underpay and poorly treat their workers, raise rents and overcharge for basic commodities to the very people who would regularly be robbed and murdered by outlaws, fighting lawmen who were known to be ruthless and unapologetic. So you wouldn't just be fighting one group of enemies, but those enemies would be fighting one another. Even with those really great undertones though, this just doesn't work for me, especially as a game. For reasons I explained earlier, it just isn't Assassin's Creed in a lot of ways, and far too many reasons to justify a game. If this was going to be explored, then I'd want it to be done in transmedia, and if you want to see this, then you actually can in the comics if you are interested in that. So then, would Ubisoft ever make this? In my opinion, I just don't see it happening unless a lot of things change. It'd be incredibly polarising for casual fans who make up a good chunk of the sales to see a game they thought was about melee combat and parkour turn into another third-person shooter. On top of this, you've also got Red Dead Redemption to fight with. Anytime a game is made with any similarities to another, you'll see the comparisons from the get-go. Take Origins and Odyssey constantly being compared to The Witcher 3 for example. This game will probably draw even more of a comparison and have to live in its shadow, like how you'll often see Sonic compared to Mario and Battlefield compared to Call of Duty. It's a problem Ubisoft really don't need when they can keep making games in a very unique series that has an incredibly niche selling point, and I think that about sums up my issue with this. I can already feel this game being incredibly generic, especially if it was made by Ubisoft Quebec, and I feel a lot of the game's value would die were it just another third person shooter that lives in another game's shadow, and for me personally it would rip a whole lot of appeal out of this series. Anyway though, those are just my thoughts on this. As I said in the opening, I'm more than open to your thoughts on this. If you want to let me know what you think, then do comment down below. In the meantime though, thank you all for watching and I'll see you next time. Thank you.